When I started working on the Frontline in Zaporizhia, we drove through a machine gun fight. My car blew up. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. The Russians are up the top of the hill. They've got machine gun positions. I don't want to go, but I won't let them go alone. Yeah, that's always my thing. I didn't know what I was getting myself into to drive for what's called civilian evacuations, getting them out of the frontline towns. I had one Wagner prisoner. He's blindfolded, his arms are tied, and when you bring him into the medical point, there's always somebody with a gun.
Do you think Ukraine will defeat Russia in this war?
I have no doubt we'll win. I have no doubt we'll win the war.
Have you ever been at a point where you thought you were really close to losing your life?
A 50 caliber round that went by my head. I hit the ground face first like I was dizzy. This is the thing that it took me a long time to get over the...
Brandon, welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks a lot for having me, Dodge. Real pleasure.
Yeah, I'm really glad you made the effort. I know you've just come back from Ukraine and you've been up doing lots of things with the Times and TV shows up in London today. I appreciate you coming all the way down to Bournemouth. Let's roll all the way back. Where did you grow up and how did you end up on the front line in Ukraine for the past year?
Where did I grow up? How did I end up in Bournemouth? How did I end up in Ukraine? I grew up in a small town in Canada. Province is called New Brunswick. If your audience are British, they've all heard of Nova Scotia. That's right beside us. And my father's family are Lebanese, all small business owners, nightclubs, restaurants, everything. And my mother's family, they're all Irish. I suppose people like to hear about that. My mother killed herself when I was about a year old. I grew up with my grandparents.
How did your mum kill herself?
She hung herself. I've learned a lot about my family history over the years. My grandfather, her father, he was in the Royal Canadian Air Force in Germany back during the Cold War, and he was an aircraft mechanic. And a lot of men in his trade, they died young men. From cleaning the aircraft engines, the chemicals they used back in those days. He had a bad cancer. From all the details I know, he had a remission after a long bout with cancer. But when the cancer came back, he decided to end his own life. So my grandfather and my mother, I come to understand when I become an adult, trying to understand my family of origin, yeah. But I live with my grandparents, my father's parents. My grandfather was the man about town, as you say here in England. Owned a lot of nightclubs. But everybody knows my family. I come from a small town of about 20,000. Everybody knows who my father is. Everybody knew what my mother did. I didn't know maybe till I was about 25 when I really thought about that. When I became conscious, that was hard growing up with a label, yeah. I never got the same punishment as any kid in school, okay, from the teachers, anything, and I was always the nephew or the grandson who got better presents at Christmas. But I never got the cane like the other boys.
What's your accent? I'm trying to hear your accent. I hear a twang of Irish coming through with something else. I can't work out what quite...
Everybody's hung up on that. I grew up in the east coast of Canada. I lived here many years, most of my adult life. I lived in Sweden for 2 years before the war, and I was a kitchen builder. Who knows? But in Ukraine, nobody ever asked me about my accent. Do you want to talk about Ukraine?
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Let's get on to Ukraine.
Let's get on to Ukraine.
And how...
Why and how?
Why and how did you decide to jump in a car and take yourself to Ukraine? How long ago was it?
So, I didn't jump into a car at all. I jumped on a plane, if you want to make a fine point of it. But I didn't jump out of the plane. I'm not qualified for that. No. I was living in Sweden. I had a girlfriend there. I was a kitchen builder, and this is very important.
So you were living in Sweden
right
in the
during
pandemic.
Corona. I lost my business. I said, okay, let's go to Sweden.
So you left Bournemouth, went to Sweden.
Yep.
And then you've gone, okay, from Sweden, I'm going to Ukraine to
I'm
help.
going to Ukraine. I became a stone worker. I started working for a living for the first time in my life. And I worked for a company from Estonia. In Sweden, working for an Estonian company, doing marble, granite. So I got to know lots of people from Estonia. You know where Estonia borders Russia, right? In that factory, there was 30 Ukrainians that worked there. Okay, I've been all over Estonia. I love them. I think they're fantastic people. I was so grateful. I had a good, not what I wanted to do, but I had a good job with good people. But when the war started, I seen a bigger conflict. I seen Ukraine was the beginning. Maybe it would be Estonia. Maybe it would be Poland. I know a lot of Polish people from boxing here in Bournemouth.
Yeah, lots.
I was thinking about people that I knew. I could put faces
Yeah.
on the potential victims. Do you understand? No far-flung conflict in the world. I didn't know anyone there. But I knew some Ukrainians. I knew some Estonians. I thought to myself, this will be World War III. I felt obliged to go when Mr. Zelensky asked for help. I squared away my life with my girlfriend. That was a disaster. Okay, she didn't take it well. With my job, with whatever money I had that she would have, but I would have some money to go. I left with a group of Swedish lads, all like Swedish Army, Swedish Marines and Rangers. A lot of people talked about going to Ukraine. Not a lot of people went. A lot of people talked. We found a group through something called Signal. I didn't know what Signal was at the time. It's like WhatsApp. Everybody uses it in Ukraine. And one guy, ex-army guy, but he was a police officer in Stockholm. He just quit the police force to go serve in Ukraine. And him and we talked about a plan to go together. And I felt I could trust him. Like right away, we had a video call with each other. I'd never met him in my life, but I could tell he wasn't full of shit. I don't know if you can say that in your podcast. We all met in Krakow on the 14th of March. And I got to be honest, I was really scared. There was a lot of, particularly Americans, that were dressed like me, but they were going the other way, west. I think the day before there was a missile attack where the Foreign Legion base was. Many people died. I don't know. We heard a lot of rumors. We heard something on the news. But I had a contact through a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. There was an old Canadian man there, ex-army man. He'd be about 60 years old. He went to Ukraine as a humanitarian volunteer. And he said, I can get you at the border. I can get your Swedish friends. I've got a place for you to stay. I didn't know what we were going to do in Ukraine. Would I be a soldier? Would I be a humanitarian worker? It's like show business. You got to show up, right? Yeah. He picked us up at the border that first day, and I remember there was women and children going the other way. There was CNN. There was everyone. He drove us to Lviv, and that chaos at the border I'd never forget. He brings us to Lviv, and it's calm. There's people having coffee, ice cream. He rented out the basement of an old beauty parlor. It was like an esthetician, I think is the term for it. And the sign wasn't in Ukrainian; it was in English. The business had gone bust, and it was a safe house where all these foreign fighters and medics and soldiers would come. And there was no less than 50 of us there in the basement. There was British boys, there was boys from Finland, and this was supposed to be a secret safe house. And that beauty parlour, estheticians, the sign was still up in English. It was actually called The Secret Place. This is our safe house. I was so scared because I heard rumours, I heard stories. There was guys who'd already been to Kyiv. There was guys that joined the Georgian Legion, the Foreign Legion. And I'm not doing that, mate. I don't mind dying for a good cause. I was scared to join the Legion. What could I offer them? I got no combat experience in the army. I wanted to be really sensible, Dodge. And I said when I went there, whatever I would do, I'd never lie. You know, if somebody asks, can I do something? Yes, I can. Do you know how to do this? No, I don't. Yeah. All the Swedish boys, 2 of them were combat medics, the 4 that I went with. They've all been to Afghanistan. I was kind of feeling a bit less than. They got invited to join a combat medical battalion. It's called Hospitallers. That's the patch on my side.
So look.
Yeah, Hospitalieri.
Yeah.
I said, "Wow, that's amazing." And they said to me, "says, do you want to join?" I said, "But what would I do? You know, I'm not like you guys." He said, "Just come. And I was very scared to go to Kyiv, to take the train to Kyiv. The battle was going on.
What month are we talking here? What year
We're talking in March, at the end of March.
March 2022.
Yeah, because we spent probably about at least a week in Lviv, kind of farting around, trying to get contacts. Nothing was happening.
What did you go with? What did you take with you?
Backpack, big backpack.
So it's you and a backpack going into Ukraine wanting to help.
I bought a lot of gear on the way, equipment, like army equipment. I don't know how much history documentaries. I was thinking Falklands War for some reason. A lot of hiking, a lot of living outside. You know, I've been there 13 months. I haven't slept 5 nights outside. I joined a medical battalion.
Hold on. What did you say there? You've been there 13 months?
Over 13 months.
And what did you say then? 5?
I haven't slept 5 nights outside.
You haven't slept 5 nights outside?
Yeah, out of the whole 13 months. I was prepared. I brought a big Bergen. I was ready for World War III. There'll be no electricity. We'll be living off rations all the time. Russians will be everywhere around the country. I had an imagination, Dodge.
Yeah.
A lot of people had an imagination. We went to Kyiv, and we met a man named Oleg, and he was a hospitaller, and he shows up in an army uniform similar to this. And he's like, you are a medic? What are you? I'm a gunner. That was Nico, one of my friends. And he said, what are you? I said, I'll be a driver. You know, thinking I could be an ambulance driver because I'm pretty handy with a Sprinter and a Transit. Yeah. He said, we have no driver position. If you want to be gunner, we have 2 gunner positions that become available since yesterday. And it's not necessarily what I came there to do. I thought, what am I going to do? You know, I haven't fired a rifle in 10 years. I fired them on ranges, on exercises, never for real. But I said I'd come and help, right? So I said, okay, I'll be a gunner. During the Battle of Kyiv, I had no medical experience. The Swedish boys were combat medics. They put them on teams, on ambulance teams, and basically they were like sprinters, transits, painted green. Some were ambulances. They converted them to ambulances with welders, you know, putting in stretchers. They were sent out right away to Irpin, Bucha. I never got to see anything in the Battle of Kyiv. I was put on a medical course for 10 days. There was about maybe 40 other English speakers, foreigners there. And there was an American nurse. No military experience, but she was 7 years as a trauma nurse, you know, in a big city, in Denver, Colorado, and they had courses happen in this basement of this church that was beginning in Ukrainian. They were bringing in all kinds of people in the unit. Some come from medical backgrounds, like a paramedic. We even had neurosurgeon students. We had veterinarians. I've met many since then, but I think we even had a gynecologist. Okay, anybody with any medical background, anybody that could drive. There was.
What are we talking here? How many people are we talking here? You all meeting?
There was about 100.
Are you meeting in one building? So this
in
is
one
where everyone's
building
meeting,
in a church.
And this is the first time you're meeting all these different nationalities saying, what do you do? What do you do? Welcome, come on, we're all here to help.
Yeah, it was like this. There was probably about 60, 70 Ukrainians. At the time, there's probably at least 20, 30 foreigners. I only know this now, but at the beginning of the war, at the full-scale invasion, because our battalion has been around many years, they were about 100 in strength. Okay, we've since grown 1,000. Okay, but there was about 100 in strength.
And explain to me what it was like. You're in Kyiv. What's Kyiv like? What? You're there with 100 people in a building learning. Who's telling you to go, right, we need you to drive there because there's something's happened over there, or we need you to drive there? Tell me, give me some sort of visualization.
It's really weird. It's not like the army. Basically, we had limited amount of ambulances, but the vehicles were coming. You know, you'd see 2 or 3 a day. You'd see this white truck. It'd come back a couple hours later green. Don't ask me how fast they dry.
Yeah.
They were forming teams. An ambulance crew was 4 people. a driver, a gunner, a paramedic, a paramedic's assistant. But those medical people could be from any background. Okay, they were like there was veterinarians.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what were you doing?
I didn't have no medical background. They threw me straight into a training course, and they did that with Ukrainians. It was because of the American Nurses Initiative. They started an English-speaking course. Until the end of the Battle of Kyiv, I'd never seen any combat. I heard it in the background, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, the explosions. I trained about 12 hours a day. It was even on the third day I gave my first IV in a training scenario. When the Battle of Kyiv ended, they brought everyone in. There's still a war going on everywhere else. I got placed on a team with a Ukrainian woman. She was 28 years old. She was to be our commander, a Ukrainian driver, and she was wounded. You know, the war's been going on since 2014. I heard a backstory about her. She didn't tell me, but people were telling me she had to have plastic surgery all on her face because apparently a mortar round in 2017 blew out the side of their ambulance. So for me, that was, wow. And she came back to serve. I was on her team. Mm. They sent us south. It's called Zaporizhzhia region. That's what happened after Kyiv. And they said, you're going to go do a frontline rotation. You, Max, the driver, Dima, he was an anesthetist, I think you call it here, an anesthesiologist. We were a 4-man team. I didn't know where we were going, and I think it took about 20 some hours. I couldn't tell you. It's not like it is now, where there was Russians everywhere. They had to plan a very long drive. I served my first month in a hospital, and this hospital.
What did you get to see? What were you seeing there in the hospital?
It was 1 month, and I would say the first couple of days there was nothing. I was like, is this the war? And I think maybe about day 3 or so, we had no less than 20 guys come in. But they don't come all at once, you see. You get an ambulance or two. You could wait an hour. You could wait 20 minutes. I seen amputations. The biggest thing I seen, the whole month of that hospital, I don't think I seen 5 gunshots. It was from artillery wounds. Okay, and the weirdest thing, I can't explain it. Some of these guys, on their skin, on their legs, on their chest, it almost looked like they had leopard prints. The whole skin. These were the small artillery rounds, like very small bits of shrapnel everywhere. A red skin hole. I seen people with giant holes. I seen. We also took civilians there. I was basically like an orderly. Okay, so I would prepare. I learned how to draw up syringes, drugs. I learned how to prepare them because I learned what type of people we were getting. So the doctors, they could tell me after a while. We would label the drugs in English. Draw me up dexamethasone. Draw me up dexaketaprophene. Draw me this for ketamine. We have the people. I was quite proud of myself. It doesn't sound like much, but I learned my way around, like to be like the referee, the third man in the ring of an operating room. Yeah. Eventually, they asked me to help with the actual surgeries. Because as simple as it is, if you're working on someone's hand, you might need someone to hold the skin back where they work with a hemostat, a scalpel. Eventually, they started letting me injecting some of the drugs as well for concussions. This is the biggest injury in the whole war. I don't care anywhere you go in Ukraine, traumatic brain injuries. Yeah. I was really proud of myself, Dodge. We worked together. There was a couple people that spoke English, and they taught me a lot of things. It eventually led to frontline duty the month after.
So what's the difference from where you are now to going frontline?
I had a bed, I had Wi-Fi, and this is the thing that it took me a long time to get over the novelty factor. It's the closest hospital to the Russians. They're about 30 kilometers away, maybe 40, depending what way you go. But we got supermarkets. You can get fresh milk. Yeah. You know, when we went, our first posting was about, I'd say 25, 30 kilometers south towards the Russians. There's no fresh milk. There's no electricity. and I was really shocked. I was expecting this whole time I couldn't get this World War III, living in the trench, living like the Falklands. We live in houses. See, I'm a medic. I'm not a soldier. I've lived in this house maybe 5 kilometers back, and it shakes at night, you know, and it's quite scary. And the guys will say, "Oh no, that was a kilometer away." You feel it.
But I've seen on your Instagram,
Yeah.
you're driving along and there's bombs going off in front of you. I've seen your Instagram of you getting blown up.
Yeah. It
Tell
looks
me-
it
tell-
looks good though, doesn't it? All those videos. I'm not.
But you know what? I have to say, it's real.
It's real. It's real.
And you're coming on here right now and you seem really calm.
Mm.
But I can sense deep down you've seen a lot of trauma and a lot of stuff over the past year. Give me some examples of what you've seen, what's been the worst.
It was probably. It's not the stuff that you see on Instagram. I never started social media till a couple months in the war, and that was purely for fundraising. That's all it's for.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, I'd never be on your podcast.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have pictures to prove it.
Yeah.
When I started working on the front line in Zaporizhia, we would evacuate casualties to that actual hospital that I used to work at. I had the first man that ever died on me in the ambulance. I think we could have saved him. It's not only my fault, it's a lot of people's fault. But, you know, I've been personally responsible for those. I don't film that stuff, you know. That's immoral, and it's actually illegal to film casualties in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Some people do it and put it on you there.
Yeah.
The most horrific thing I ever seen in the war, personally, not talking about the civilians, I worked on what's called a medical stabilization, and they take buildings where this is going to be a hospital, because those guys won't make it to the hospital, particularly in hotspots. Towards the end of my 3rd month in Ukraine, our team, living in a house, waiting. That's what a medic is. You live and you wait. They said, in the next couple of days, there's going to be an attack. We're going to attack the Russians, and you're going to move to a stabilization. We didn't get told when we go, but about maybe 2 days later, around 3 a.m, we woke up, and I've heard the most artillery, I've heard the most missiles, I've heard the most rockets, and it did not stop till about noontime the next day. It went from about 3 a.m. till about at least 10 in the morning. Boom, 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 and we got a call on
Ukraine attacking.
Ukraine attacking.
Okay.
And we got called. This is, you're going to the stabilization point. I guess we got called late. We went to this old building, like a community hall. There was ambulances moving left, right, and centre. There was army trucks. There was BMPs, tanks, different things. You could hear it, and you could hear it like maybe a few kilometres away. These are all guys that won't make it to the hospital. The medic determines that from the first point of care. I know, because I'm personal friends with the head commander of that unit now. He spoke perfect English. Our worst day there, we had 65 severe casualties. We had we had amputations. We had holes in legs. We had internal complications like penetrating chest wounds. We had people with no eyes. When you get a casualty in, what you have to do, they get put on a floor and they get triaged. They're like, I don't know what they say in Ukrainian, but I know what's going on. It's like, no, put him over there. He's going to die. No, bring them here and wait till... They don't even have beds. It's a makeshift hospital. They have about tables about the size of this. I had a man, and it's not much, but do you know what a tourniquet is? Where you put basically
Is
a
that the
tourniquet,
wrap around
a strap over an extremity
yeah.
that stops the bleeding.
Yeah.
And I had to inspect a guy, because the first thing you got to do, you got to check their pockets. We need their documents. They need to know who they are. If they die, we need proof of life. The families don't get anything. We need to find radios, grenades, and documents, and secure it to them. But I noticed a tourniquet high in his leg, and I seen the hole with the bandage, but through the bandage I could actually see that there was still a small pulse of blood. Okay, so you see, there's good tourniquets, there's bad ways of putting them on. You can put a tourniquet on someone, if you don't put it right, they'll bleed slower. they'll bleed slower and slower. I told the doctors, I said, no, stop with that, man. And I reapplied a tourniquet on the guy until I seen the blood stop. That was the first time that I've ever done, I've done like what you call a triage call myself. Doesn't sound like much, but because he had to wait for a bed.
Yeah.
I stopped the bleed. I also stacked a lot of bodies there. I remember, you know what a body bag is. I remember we ran out of body bags. So we have these heat blankets, these plastic blankets. So we duct tape them, we gaffer tape them in those. I worked there for that battle for about 3-4 days towards the end of our rotation. That was mid to late June, my first year. See, you want to see all the stuff, and people can look on my social media. I started that later on, driving around, working civilian evacuation, casualty. A bomb goes off in the distance, but you're not holding someone. You know you're going to and from. It's really scary, but I've been there I don't know how many times, but when a man actually dies, or maybe we could have done better. That's. Now you want to hear about the shock stuff, but me personally, that's the stuff. That's the real stuff.
Have you ever come across Russians?
Yeah, I have. During that first rotation on the Zaporizhzhia front, we had Russian prisoners. We had 2 of them. Again, concussions. There was no penetrative wounds.
So you're helping the Russians who are injured?
I wasn't helping them. The doctors were. I was just, if I'm honest, I was very curious.
Yeah.
I was very curious. Later on in the war, in Bakhmut, I spent a lot of time in Bakhmut from July on. It wasn't till about January I seen my first Wagner prisoner.
What's a Wagner prisoner?
Wagner is, I'm told, I'm not an expert, but basically Wagner's a mercenary group. They fought all over Africa, everywhere. They got really big in this war. So they're not actually technically the Russian army. They're mercenaries. Apparently some of them came out of prison. They were given a deal. You could get out of prison, and if you serve 6 months, you're a free man. I don't know if that's his background in Wagner, but in January we took one out of Bakhmut, and we took him to the nearest hospital point.
So you're saying these men are coming out of Russian prisons
to join
the Russian army to fight for them?
Yeah, that's what we're told. That's what the news says.
How do you feel? How did people around you who are Ukrainian work in this, knowing that 2 Russians are coming in? Roles reversed? Would the Russians get rid of the Ukrainians?
Well, I've transported Ukrainian soldiers who were captured by Russians. This is going all over the place. But before I came back here, I worked in a place called Avdiivka, south of Bakhmut. Some of our guys were hung. Yeah. My friend Oleg, because I don't speak Ukrainian or Russian, but I work on the med point, so the radio always comes and goes. Oleg went and got 11 bodies. The officers were never found. Who wasn't killed, shot, but not officers, but soldiers were hung in trees outside Avdiivka. Yeah, I know that happens. And about us and the Russians, because it's only the 2 occasions. We had 2. Me personally, we had 2 early in the war. That would have been maybe May. But I had 1 Wagner prisoner that we transferred. He's blindfolded, his arms are tied, and when you bring him into the medical point, there's always somebody with a gun. Nobody talks to him. They ask the name. Everybody's curious, okay, because I'm not a fighter. I've seen a lot of dead Russian bodies, but that's not a live Russian. I've been shot at, but that's from a distance. But to actually see a real live Russian, I was really curious. And you know what? I get the feeling everybody was curious. I wanted to say something to him. But at the end of the day, I didn't think there was any honor in it. Like, I wanted to say something really sarcastic, and but I didn't kill his friends. He didn't. It wasn't my honor. I don't know if you can call it that word.
Yeah. How old roughly do you reckon he was?
Oh God, he would have been a rough 30 if he was. He was dehydrated. I know that. I would say he was underweight. You could count his ribs, and he was just a concussion. That man. That, like I said, the most common in.
What were the Ukrainians doing with him?
You treat him. The security services come. So not the army, but the actual security services. So they're not like the police. And he has to go from a further point of care from us. So medically, we can't discharge him to them. He would have had to go further west, maybe to Konstantinivka, which would be about another 20 kilometers, to a proper hospital. What happens after that, I don't know. I don't know, Dodge.
Is Russian and Ukrainian the same language, but it's just a different accent?
No.
Can a Ukrainian understand a Russian and vice versa?
Almost everybody in Ukraine I know of speaks Russian, but Ukrainian, they tell me the Russians don't understand it. There's people in the far east of Ukraine that aren't comfortable in Ukrainian. I can read Cyrillic now. I did my Duolingo, if you know what that is, and I probably know about 100 words. Most of the words I know are Russian, if I'm completely honest. Okay. Half the country speaks Russian.
What sort of words were you learning?
Buryat blet nahui blet.
Which means?
Not very nice.
Go on.
Buryat fucking shit fuck. Buryat's an ethnic group, and they're Russian fighters. I know how to get to any point. Hospital, Bonitsia, Premo Prava Leva, front, right, left. I've done more driving than anything in Donbass. I know all the town names. I know all my numbers. I know how to run the codes with the casualties. So I might not know what they're saying on the radio, but there's probably about 10, 15 words. It doesn't sound like much. I know now. Yeah. I know what we're in for.
Massive respect to you, by the way.
Thank you.
Honestly, what I'm hearing now is huge respect.
Well, I'm very grateful to be here, but the reality of the world is, if I fund on social media, on a YouTube, on an Instagram, the way it works in Ukraine, and I feel a bit disingenuous about this. I have a camera, I get donations, I buy diesel generators, I document giving out the diesel generators, I get more money.
Who from?
They all come from Germany now. I found everybody through Instagram. That's how we found each other. International aid group, they help the fire brigades. And those guys, why do they help Ukraine? No German's going to watch this. They're all football hooligans, these guys. Or they were at one time. Stuttgart Football Club had relationships with Kharkiv Football Club. But a lot of these guys were paramedics, firefighters. They formed an NGO that formed out of the war. They bring my generators every month, every 2 months. Here in England, do you know the kind of aid we get from here? I buy radios through my Instagram and my YouTube, and they come from Radio Trader up in Widnes near Liverpool. Since I've been in the UK, I've actually met them in person. Sophie, who sells them to us, her husband just so happens to be Ukrainian. We get a good deal.
Brilliant.
Every week, every 2 weeks, there's a boy from Blackburn, and I only found him through Instagram. He gets a Ryanair flight to... How much is a Ryanair flight to Poland? Not much. Yeah, he pays about €500 in baggage. He brings things like radios, night vision, brings them over, not just to me, but there's people like this in England, there's people like this in Europe. We found each other through Instagram.
So basically you set up your account, and the knock-on effects of setting your account, and the reasons why is because you knew you were going to get funded.
Basically.
And there's lots of people out there without accounts, I'd imagine, who aren't getting anything sent to them.
I think they would have gone broke and gone home. Okay. There are some. I do have friends who are in I'm not in the Foreign Legion. I know some of those guys don't have any social media at all. Some of them do.
When you
some of
first
them
went there, was there Ukrainians wary about you?
very wary of us. Very wary of us.
Why? The accent?
The attitudes.
Attitude? Okay.
The attitudes. I don't mean to disrespect anybody, and there's some fantastic soldiers in this country, in America, but more often than not, it's the Canadians, it's the British, the Americans. A lot of them went to Ukraine, who like the soldier types, and were like, yeah, I was in 32 Commando, I was in 5th Group Special Forces. The Ukrainians don't even know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
They just want to know, are you a gunner? Are you a driver?
Yeah.
And then...
Are you one of us? Can you help? Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever been at a point where you thought you were really close to losing your life?
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone likes to talk about Bakhmut. Bakhmut. But most of my war story is in a town called Soledar. And Soledar is northeast of Bakhmut. You could probably drive there in a hurry in about 20 minutes. In July, I had an opportunity to go work. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but to drive for what's called civilian evacuations, getting them out of the frontline towns. And I did a few of these jobs in villages for about a week. Go into the village, drive through the mortar or whatever it would be, get this person and go. But Soledar was an actual city. It wasn't a village, you know. And someone said, you can't go to Soledar, Ukrainians, foreigners. But my partner at the time, I was working with Philip, said, we're going to go to Soledar tonight because I have the contact details of a woman in the town. There's 7 people that want to go. And it was very, very scary for me. There wasn't a shot fired. I'd never been to Soledar, but I had an imagination. We talked to the army, the guys in 93rd Brigade. We found the place on the top of the hill, well away from the Russians, probably 4 or 5 kilometers away from them. But there were 7 people, and one of them was a mother, and she had a baby. She had an infant, and crying baby. And you can't drive with your lights on at night. We don't have night vision. I had a crying baby driving in the pitch black. I even had to drive with my head out the window, you know, not to have any reflection. Probably one of the scariest I've ever been in my life, but for another person. Imagine a baby. The next day after that, we went back to Soledar, and we came with my Pajero. And for the next week, we probably got 40, 50 people out a day, going from place to place. That's where you've seen those some of those artillery shots in my social media and things blowing up. But one night we went further. See, all the civilian work, you tend to do the easy work first, and then you go further. It's counterintuitive, right? But word gets around the villagers because they know how to move around. Oh, these people want to leave. One night we drove through a machine gun fight, and we went to a house to look for people that were never there. And the army guys were saying, "You're here for the civilians. Where have you been? We were expecting someone for a day, 2 days." They took all the civilians, and there was 17 people. They brought them up to a school up the road because they have basements. All the Soviet buildings, they have like bunkers. I actually drove through machine gun. My car never got hit, but I could actually see things that like bouncing off a building. I was so scared with Philip. He's braver than me. I packed my Pajero like sardines, and Philip said, "Bring them to Nosova, northwest to in Soledar, but safer. Come back and get me and the rest." And it's kind of embarrassing. I've uploaded it up on my YouTube. I almost like a little girl. I was crying as I know, Philip, I might not come back. I might not come back for you. Not that I might bottle it. I went back and got Philip, and I got the others. But that's my biggest fear. My fear is like that my fear will cripple me, like fight night.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 days later, we were working there again, and then he said, do you want to go to Knopf, even further east? And I was foolish enough to look at a map the night before. That's Russian. We drove out. Solidar's a mining town, so there's like a lot of quarries and pits, and we drove through the last residential area. There's a big bush, a tree line, and then the road gets really dusty. And he says, no, now Victor's been there today. There's mines, but you have to follow Victor's tracks. So you have to follow the tire tracks. There's not too many cars moving there. And you have to cross the bridge, and then you have to cut right as quick as you can behind the buildings. The Russians are up the top of the hill. They've got machine gun positions. I went through with them. I didn't want to go. I don't want to go, but I won't let them go alone. Yeah, that's always my thing. Yeah. I won't leave you on your jack. At the bridge, it's what you call low ground, and I knew enough from the army about how dead ground works with machine gun. They can't actually see you. The Ukrainians had mined the bridge with these big pucks, these anti-tank mines, and had to drive like an S pattern around the mines. And then you got to drive up to where these buildings are. You can't go anywhere other than that because there's craters in the road, but you're trapped behind a big, tall, like a council estate. Then they started firing on us. The mortars go up, they come down. We got 9 people out over the run of like an hour. There was 4 kids. They were all boys. I think. Maybe the oldest one was like a tall, probably just hit puberty. The youngest one would have been like 4 years old. I gave one of them my helmet, The old man said, we got to get a babushka. We got to get the old lady down the street. Okay. I don't want to do this. I want to get the fuck out with them. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it's like, okay. And I'm glad we did. When we're crossing... It's like a residential area with houses and trees, and some of them are blowing up, but then there's like a big crossroads over to like the council estate side. Looking back now, and other people have told me, it was probably like a 50 caliber round that went by my head. I've heard later on that those things can actually cause brain hemorrhage without even touching you. I don't know what happened, but I kind of I hit the ground face first, like I was dizzy. I got up and I ran. I hid behind a building with this family, and from that building to their house, that's not 500 meters, 400 meters. Victor said to me, take the family, bring them back to the collection point outside of Soledar altogether, and come back, because Philip has just run off on his own and he's found more people. But the truth is, Dodge, I bottled it again. I wouldn't leave because of the mines. I asked Victor, well, have you got any more people? He says, yeah, I got 2 more people coming. Well, I've got the family and I can put them in mine. Can we wait for yours and I'll drive behind you? And, I kept those kids and everything. It's on my YouTube. Jesus, the things I do for funding. The little boy's crying with the helmet in his ears. But I didn't want to be the one to drive first in the mines. You got the anti-tank mines. You got to drive around that S. And the Russians can drop mines from the air. So the big mines are Ukrainian, the tank mines. The little ones, like the anti-personnel, are Russian. Yeah. But you can't see those so clear. I basically wanted Victor to go first. Yeah. We got them out, and it's scary, and we drove them out. But again, my friend Philip stayed. We got to go back. But it was getting towards dark, and you remember what I told you about driving in dark and Soledar, and now it's a lot further. When you come out from the tree line towards the quarry where the road breaks up, we should keep distance, 100 meters, 150 meters. Nobody actually knows what that is in Ukraine.
Well, keeping distance from each car?
Between the cars.
Okay.
Between the cars.
And the reason for that is?
Well, if one shell hits, maybe one gets hit, the other one can help the other one, or we both don't go at the same time.
Okay.
or we're not such a tempting target for something else, like a direct fire weapon. But I wasn't thinking. When we come around the corner, I was right on his arse end, and then because I'm the pack guard, the dust flew up, and when I come around the corner, my car blew up. I've watched the video because the camera was recording, but I remember like a hot flame, like I could feel like on my skin, like it felt like an infrared sauna. Yeah. The windows exploded, the sides, the front, the instruments, the panels. I think I seen my phone charger in the cigarette port there actually blow out. I don't know how I did it, but I've driven my whole life. I instinctually, it was an automatic, that truck. I put it in park. I just pushed in the little button and I slammed it in park, and I opened the door and I came out like as drunk as you would like. And it was only the other day someone told I told the story to a friend. I stopped. It was 2 anti-personnel mines that blew up my truck. I stopped a meter from an anti-tank mine. If there was an anti-personnel for people, anti-tank, what does a Mitsubishi Pajero stand a chance? Basically, the Russian mine saved my life from the Ukrainian mine. I got I was in a real mess, and I don't remember it all, but there was a Ukrainian position with like an anti-tank weapon up in the hill, and those boys came and got me.
How do the Ukrainians know that you're fighting with them? Is it the badge?
The badge.
What's the difference between the uniform you're wearing and the Russians are wearing?
Well, this is a multicam uniform. The Ukrainian army wears a pixelated uniform. The Russians also wear a pixelated uniform. Now the Wagner guys have uniforms like me. I wasn't wearing it at the time, but a lot of time we have tape. We have different colored tapes, and they change for the area. I won't go into the tapes, but I wasn't wearing any tape at the time. But I wasn't speaking Ukrainian, and I wasn't speaking Russian. I don't think the Russians have any English volunteers, but I was crying like a baby and screaming. They came down and got me from the tank position, a couple of the boys. But I was smart enough. I grabbed my helmet. It blew off my head because I didn't have it strapped. I grabbed my med pack, and I had 10 packs of Marlboro in the glove box. And don't ask me, I knew right away. I did not forget about the Marlboros because I might have been in for a night. Mm-hmm. But eventually, they got me evacuated that night to Kramatorsk, Dnipro. 30 days, well, almost 30 days altogether. Eventually to Kyiv hospital. I've lost pretty much all the hearing in my right ear, and I do have some cognitive decline, if I can be honest. I'm not stupid, but I'm not as quick as I used to be. Yeah. I was out of service for about 6 weeks altogether. Yeah.
You're a seriously brave man.
But I told you how scared I was.
No, I can hear in the voice. And I couldn't think, there's not many men that I know who are as brave as you. I know you're being honest now, saying you're scared and crying like a baby and what have you, but I think 99.9% of men would be feeling exactly the same. But are you carrying anything? Are you carrying a gun?
Not then, I wasn't. Not then with the civilian work.
Why not?
Sometimes I do. Well, even some soldiers don't go with a gun, like regular soldiers in the army when they do civilian work. If they need to get them out of the area, yes. But quite often, the soldiers, a lot of civilians are distrustful of the army because they feel it's the army that brought the trouble to them. You know, the reason their town's getting bombed is because of the army. If the army would just go to the next town. This is only what's translated to me from other people.
What's the word on the street as a Ukrainian? So you're a Ukrainian family. You got your daughter and your son shipped off with the wife over the border to Poland, etc. The men are fighting. What's the truth?
About what? About the war?
Yeah.
Well,
if you're a Ukrainian, what's the truth? If you're a Russian, what are they being fed?
I don't know what they're being fed. I try not to look at any social media except my own, unless it's someone I work with and I want to see the humanitarian work. I know a lot of people,
Yeah.
but I know in Kyiv they have a different idea of the war than what we do. Unless they know somebody who's telling them what's going on, they can go by TikTok just like kids here in England.
Just explain to me what Kyiv is like. Is it like a city in England? Is it like there's cafes and bars and restaurants? What?
It's hipster central.
Is it?
It's hipster central. They've got the most beautiful girls in the world. They've got guys who look like they're walking around like Depeche Mode. They've got an area like gentrified that you and I maybe you couldn't even afford to live in. They've got wealthy people. They've got poor people. I think it's a city of it's got to have at least 5-6 million people.
Wow. So it's a full-on cosmopolitan city.
Full-on cosmopolitan city.
And that's the only area where the Russians can't get to.
They can go anywhere they want, but I know the war's changed. You can drive to Dnipro, which I think it's a great city. It's like a working class city. It's like, how Londoners are. Dnipro's kind of like Manchester, a bit rougher, but friendlier people have a chat with you, Even if they don't speak the language, I get that feeling on the street, especially wearing uniform.
Have you got any stats on how many Russians have been killed or how many Ukrainians have been killed over the past year?
Again, you're asking me things I don't know. Go to Times Radio, go to... I know what my friends tell me.
What are your friends telling you?
Well, I know one, like for example, my buddy Alexei. He's been my casualty a couple of times, like shrapnel. He even caught COVID. I worked on a med point outside of Bakhmut, so they sent him to live with us for a couple of days. He's just one guy who joined on the 24th. He's killed about 3 or 4 so far. I mean, that's not very revealing. It's not.
How would you feel about killing a Russian?
I don't really think about it. I've only had to use my gun twice in the war. Sometimes I have one, depending on what brigade we work for, because medics don't have to carry one. They can if they want. Some choose not to. In Soledar towards the end of January, I was there, but the only kill I have in the whole war was it was October, November, coming out of Bakhmut with 3 guys. We have like these block posts, where you security check. You have to give them your password, and if you don't have the password, you've got to get searched. The police were there, and there was a drone in the air flying low, and we were driving out. I'd never fired my gun yet in the war, except on a range. We got out to have a look. You could see the red dot in the sky. Wouldn't have been 100 meters up, 50 meters up maybe. And all of a sudden the police, 3 of them just started shooting at them with AKs, and we were like, fuck yeah! And there was 4 of us, and one guy had a shotgun, oddly enough. And I had a red dot on my rifle, it's like a guide, like a scope. And after about the 3rd shot, I just took calm, cool single shots. They were all going automatic. I'm 90% sure I nailed the bastard. It was real funny. The cops, where the drone fell, like to the left of the block post, I don't know, maybe 20, 30, 50 meters away, they started like it was Rainbow Six, like it was storming the Iranian embassy. They were like moving, dun 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 dun. And I knew, and I've not, I've never been in the thick. I got blown up and shot at, but not like the hard bastards, right? I was like, guys, what are you doing? And I walk over to the drone, and I'm like, I felt really good about myself because I'm positive I was the one who took out that drone. Couple minutes later, like the drone was all zzz, 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 one of the wings, and this guy comes out, Nahui bled, suka bled, and he's Ukrainian. I shot down a Ukrainian drone, Dodge.
Yeah.
And then right then, and I always like to have a banter with them in like the, I don't know, 50 words I spoke at the time. Not then. I just, well, lads, that's really bad there. I guess it just happens. It's war, right? I gotta go. Bye.
Yeah.
The cops came to us afterwards, and we were about to leave, and they said, have you boys got any ammo? I said, yeah. I was like, can we have some? I said, yeah. I don't ask questions. I never ask for interpretation. This gets told after. And it was Vova or Max that told me, he says, yeah, they wanted some ammo because they're not army. Whenever police shoot their gun, they have to fill out a report. If it's a Russian drone, it's all right. But for a Ukrainian... So anyway, we got the cops off the hook. Different world, eh?
Yeah, it's a
different
massively
world.
Different world. What's do you think Ukraine will defeat Russia in this war?
See, now you're asking me the abstracts, and that's one I can answer. I don't know how, but I have no doubt we'll win. I have no doubt we'll win the war.
And how long do you think it will be until the war is stopped?
So it's just my opinion. I think it depends on Western aid. And I'm just talking opinions now. I think it's a cruel, sick game. I think BAE, companies like them, like Saab, Boeing, the weapons producers, they don't want this to end. They get to try out all their new toys. And so many people criticize us on the internet. Oh, you're not doing this, you're doing that. You should do this. And some of them actually know what they're talking about in a Western sense. But we just live in holes because of the drones. They see it. We see everything and they see everything. We know that we know where they are and they know where we are. But until we get more of those, those HIMARS missiles, things like that. I've seen HIMARS launched 3 times. One time I was even in the pitch black. I was a couple cars behind and I didn't know if a tank was trying to pull it out and out. I started playing on my phone. It was back a bit. I was about 20 meters from a HIMARS missile being launched. What a feeling. Not like a roller coaster, I'll tell you. When we have those, I don't hear much of those anymore. It just seems to go on and on. But what I can comment on, my last 2 months, I served in Avdiivka with 36th Brigade, that's the Marines. We had some really heavy casualties. And a lot of those men were lost and unrecoverable, and we don't know about the fate on one particular night. I won't go into numbers because I don't know the exact number, but it was all a matter of lack of drones on our side. Lack of drones. We don't... When the wounded men came back to our med point, I've never seen this before ever in the war. I was patching up his neck. Necks are quite dramatic, but it wasn't super serious. They would not let him go to hospital. This sergeant, they wanted to talk to him and with a tablet and the map and to, like the last known position. We lost a lot of men, and truth is we don't really know the fate of a lot of them. We lost a lot of drones quite early in that. I don't know how bad it is, but I think it's a lot worse than any war that since Korea. I've seen missile attacks. My own house got hit by a missile.
Is there someone in Ukraine like the SAS who are out to go and take Putin out?
Well, they've got some. I've heard a lot of stories about special forces. I've heard stories about guys that go into Russia. I've heard, and it's just a story, but I like it and I believe it to be true. I heard there was a man that in cities like Belgorod, which is a big city, he would Ukrainian man act like a drunk, and he was half drunk all the time, and he used to take the buses and used to go do things, things would blow up. It's only a story, but I like it and it fits along with the news. But if there was SAS, if there was, hypothetically, not that they'd ever talk to someone like me, of course, I think if they were coming there, special forces, I think they'd be flawed in their viewpoints, because human nature, cops have cop friends, army guys have army friends, you know how that goes. So they would probably want to make contact with special forces guys. They would probably want to make contact with, let's say hypothetically, the Foreign Legion, whether they're special forces or not, other people they could teach English to. But they probably wouldn't be talking to the regular Ukrainian units. They'd probably be seeing one aspect of the war, in a very big war. And those type of people, if they were in Ukraine, they'd probably be feeding that sort of information back to the army and Rishi Sunak based on that limited scope. I'm not saying they're there or not. Of course, I wouldn't know about that. But if I had my opinion, I think they should, if such people were to be sent there, they should be regular captains, they should be regular sergeant majors in regular tank units, regular infantry units. And if they dared, they should send them out there to see the regular everyday war.
Yeah.
It's not a special forces. I know that much, and I'm no expert.
Yeah.
It's a grunts war.
Yeah.
It's a grunts war.
Are you seeing, how much artillery are you seeing being sent over from the west?
Well, it depends on the day. I don't know if you know this. Zelensky or Zaluzhny don't send me a memo, Dodge, me specifically every day. I only know when I see new stuff come around. I don't know about the artillery, but it seems to me that we have to spread it thinner. I've been in a couple battles before where Ukraine advanced. I told you about the one in Zaporizhia. In Bakhmut in end of November, early December, there was another battle, a failed offensive on Ukraine's side. I hear a lot of artillery. I hear a lot of mortar. But unless it's an offensive, I have no doubt the Russians have more than us, because I hear more in the distance than I do close.
You think the Russians have got more artillery than Ukraine?
No doubt. I hear it. And I'll tell you what, when you're in a town long enough, if you're there for half a day, when I hear a shell, depending on the distance, I don't know where it's going to hit. It's probably going to hit in the same area unless they change around. But I can almost tell you within like 5, 6, 7 seconds, I know when it's going to hit.
Have you got the fear of losing your own life?
I don't want to die. But there's worse fears I have.
What are they?
Well, I got a lot of good friends now, you know. Doesn't sound like much, but it was only a month before I left Ukraine. I did my first IV catheter in a combat situation. Our house just got blown up and 2 guys got hurt outside. The guys they killed our cats, but what happened, you know, I've done that in an ambulance, I've done that in a hospital, but that was my first time, like under red light, under people screaming and glass and mud and blood, and that was a special team that came to live in our area. And they're only there for a couple of weeks. Those are the real boys. Yeah. You know, and I was like, you know, maybe for 5 minutes I didn't think about it. I was the most important person there, and I did my job. And anyway, the commander of that team, who incidentally speaks good English, he's become my best friend, and not only him, but I'm scared I'll let them down. They can't leave. There's nowhere for them to go. And I'm not just talking the badass commandos. I'm talking nurses. I'm talking doctors. I'm talking volunteers. I'd be scared if I let them down. Yeah, that's my biggest fear. Yeah.
Now you're back here. How long have you been back here for?
I came home on the 19th of April. Still living in Sweden, and I've been doing speaking things with volunteer organizations who help us. One organization in Sweden actually gave me a car, well, a Land Cruiser. They brought over 200 diesel 4-wheel drives to the army of Ukraine. I've been helping them going around to speak, and I came back to the UK on the 8th. So how many days? That was last Friday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I've done speaking, YouTube, different events, and now to come see you. Yesterday I was on the floor above Piers Morgan.
Yeah.
I hate Piers Morgan. I shouldn't say this, but when I finished my interview at Times Radio, I went and used the loo. Mm. And I quite fancied that Piers was on the floor below me. I'm having before I go back, I suppose I'm having my 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to raise more support for us.
Trying to raise more and more awareness by doing what you're doing now.
Yeah.
You're a special human being, Brandon.
Yeah. Some people say I'm pretty special. My ex-missus.
Yeah. You're really, really special in what you've done over the last 13 months. Are you going back or are you staying here now? Are you going back to Ukraine?
Yeah, in about a month. I'm going on a course. So I've got a couple more of these speaking things. I grew up in Canada, so I got invited by the CBC, which is a big network and the equivalent of Parkinson.
Yeah.
Who I grew up. That's an ego trip.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do those, and with the Ukrainian, and right before I go back, I'm going to Texas for a course, a shooting course. I stopped fundraising so much for generators and things now. I focus more on the solution, night vision and thermal scopes for rifles. So far, I've brought about 50,000 euros in night vision. I can speak about the night vision, how well that's been working, because I also work on an armoured vehicle, one of the Lend-Lease vehicles, the machine gunner and the driver, but also for the rifleman. So I'm going to take a course from Texas. Where else would you learn to shoot?
Absolutely.
But I'm learning how to teach marksmanship principles at night, and so far on this current fundraiser, my goal was 30 thermal scopes, which is a little over 35,000 euros. I've got about 12 of them so far, so I suppose I've done well.
Mate, you're special. You're a special
Just don't
person.
lie.
No.
Just don't lie. Try your best.
That's what you've done. Before we finish up here, where can people find you?
I do have an Instagram, and that's the best way to see current things about the war, about the volunteers. Once I started YouTube, I started to find success with our work. And if you just type Brandon Mitchell Ukraine into YouTube, that's probably half my job.
Yeah.
I do my work, and at night I edit my videos, and I put them out a few weeks later. When if it's sensitive stuff. Yeah. Brandon Mitchell Ukraine on YouTube.
Brilliant. Anyone listening out there, please go and follow Brandon. He is one special human being. Not all superheroes wear capes, mate.
Mate.
And I can't help but think how proud your mum would be of you.
Mate. I want to make other people proud, like here in Bournemouth. If you'll humour me, or you'll just cut it. It's up to you. But I was 3 years clean when I came here, and I just tried to do the best I could. But a lot of people in this town were good to me. A lot of people in this town, I was as good to them as they'd let me. A lot of people are closed off, in England. Ukrainians aren't like that. There's so many people I would have always given the shirt off my back for them. But on a personal level, I don't want to be famous, but I just hope that all the people know me, that's always all you ever had to do was ask for my help. I love this town. I owe a lot to the people here, like Les, like Steve Bendel. If I didn't have Bournemouth, I would. Well, it's a big part of my journey.
Yeah, I hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on and for your honesty.
Thanks a lot. Been a real pleasure, Dodge.
You're a gentleman, and if anything I can do to help, we've got each other's mobiles number now. I'm here for you.
Yeah, well, I'm a volunteer on a donation budget. Want to bring me to you can shout me Chicken and Blues. That'd be all right.
No worries at all.
Yeah, see, I'm shouting other businesses in town now.
You're a good man.
Thank
I've
you.
loved this. I've absolutely loved it. Thanks for
you.
making the effort. You're a gentleman.
It's been a real pleasure.
Good man. Cheers,
Thanks
bro.
a lot.
Thank you.